Andy's here. Why don't you introduce yourself? Everybody knows Shingy.
Okay, my name's Andy. Is this on? My name's Andy Bateman, and I am the CMO and co-founder of Bailo Tequila. I was the CMO of Lalo Tequila that we sold last year to Tito's, which, yeah, God bless you. I'm also the co-founder of a consultancy called Mixtape Partners. I'm also a co-founder of a company called Human Presence, which is a AI-based identity business. And I'm also an executive coach.
Oh, shit. I know. I was like,
Hard
wow,
act
I
to
thought,
follow.
well, you got more than one job, man. You must be Jamaican. Okay. Okay. All right. Why don't you introduce yourself?
I will. Thank you. We're also married.
Yeah.
I'm business partners.
Not on stage, just
I'm
real life.
Sofia Laurell. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tiny Organics. We're a baby and toddler food company. The big mission for us really is to shape the palates of generations to come to learn to love vegetables and healthy flavors from the beginning. This has lifelong impact. I'm fortunate to have run the company now for 8 years, and we now have a little baby. His name is Bastian. He's 13 months, and he loves the meal, so that's a full circle moment. I'm also on the board of Amazing Swayable, so excited to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you. So she was so nervous about the questions I was going to ask. So I'm going to ask you the very first one because I think it has to do with category creation. So just talk about the history, because right now what we're talking about is really the building of CPG brands, but they all start with kind of a foundational category creation. So talk about the history of baby food.
So human beings thrived for many millennia eating real whole foods, and only in the last, call it, couple of 100 years did we start overcomplicating and overprocessing our food, especially in the US. And we'll talk more. We're all Australia, England, Finland. So we'll talk more about that. But especially in the US, we think the food systems are not in great shape, to be honest. The category of baby food really is fully invented in the 1920s. Before that, again, people were feeding their children real food. It's really interesting how food is connected to kind of societal norms. Like in the 1950s, for example, if a woman was breastfeeding, she was seen as poor by society. So, a lot of moms started buying baby food. And at that time, it was more unhealthy than it is today. But you look at the baby food aisle, there's a lot of shelf-stable products, which are fine. Now I have a baby now, so I know the convenience that it offers. But it is, as a category, as I mentioned, fully invented. We wanted to kind of bring back the way we used to eat and feed our children.
Love it. Thinking about category invention. So you kind of had a category reinvention in the, we can share mics, in the alcohol space. Why did you choose tequila the first time? Why did you choose the alcohol industry in the first place?
Well, I think alcohol has been around for a long great thing. Works for me. I got invited to join a tequila brand called Lalo, and initially it was a consulting assignment, and I met the founders, I met the team, spent the day with them in Austin, and I wrote them. I went back to LA and I wrote them a note and said, I don't think you need a consulting assignment. You need a CMO because I don't know what you're doing, but it's not really marketing. So they said, we agree. Could you come and join us? So it was this wonderful moment. I think timing is everything in CPG. Tequila was having a moment. Little known facts. 67% of the entire tequila category is controlled by 3 brands, Casamigos, Patron, and Don Julio. All of them are dying. All of the growth in tequila is coming from smaller brands, micro brands, and mostly from additive-free tequila. So Lalo was an additive-free tequila. It also had a wonderful story, 2 co-founders, boyhood friends, made a tequila for their friends for a wedding, and that began the life of Lalo. but it wasn't the reason why it was successful. And when we sold last year to Tito's, it was then the number one Blanco tequila in America, which is crazy because it's 5 years old.
Right. Right. And so, no, but just before you hand it to Shingy, because he won't shut up. But now you also have the fastest growing brand, right? So talk a little bit about that now.
The new one is Byla. I wish it was the fastest growing brand, but we haven't launched
That's
it
what
yet.
this card says here.
Yeah, I don't know who wrote that.
Became
but
the fastest growing spirit brand in the U.S.
I wasn't gonna compete with it because we haven't actually launched yet.
Somebody gave you the wrong cards. Okay, so talk about what. Yeah, go.
So off the back of Lalo, I got invited to join another company and become its co-founder called Byla. Bailo is a similar drink. It's ready to drink in a can. It's additive-free, it's preservative-free, natural fruit juices, and the sweetener comes from coconut water, which also has hydration properties. So we're launching that in San Diego and LA. It's pretty much bootstrapped. We've got a seed round funding from friends. We've got distribution, and we kick off in August. So you're all invited to the party. It's at a Mexican restaurant in Beverly Hills called Gracias Madre.
Okay.
And yeah, we hope that it is catching the next wave of tequila, which is ready to drink and fresh and additive-free ingredients.
So it's just right down the block, the launch party. Okay, great.
Yeah.
We'll all be there. Years ago, somebody came into, there's a Mexican restaurant I used to go to all the time. And, this is when I was at Pepsi. And this guy who came a couple of times, he pitched me this thing called Cangria. And I said, that's never going to work. Never going to work. And of course, to see the ready to drink category explode. And I think there's two pieces to it that's interesting is one, it's convenience, but the other thing is it's control. So like when I get a tequila drink at a bar, who knows how much tequila? Now, usually I say don't put anything in it, but who knows, what you're actually getting. And I feel like people like the ability to control consumption now more than we ever had before. And anyway, that's just my general thought, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think one is controlled consumption. The other is we care more and more about what we put in our bodies.
Right.
I mean, there's this narrative about we're drinking less. The stats don't prove it out. It's not true. We're just drinking different. We're spending more on each drink, and we're drinking stuff that, when we put it in our bodies, we know it's decent liquid.
Right. Category. So,
Hang on, can I do a follow-up question to that, or more of a statement?
yeah, please.
So the company's called Bailo.
Baila.
How the hell do you say that?
Baila.
Baila?
Baila.
I clearly don't get out often enough, buddy. But what's interesting, I think the follow-up for me is, isn't there when you're saying they're trying to consume, if I think about what both of you have in common,
Right.
you're trying to create cleanness, convenience, but also that comes with a conundrum. I would argue that in the CPG space, the biggest problem is narrative. So once you've created that potential category, you have to convince somebody that the barman who I'm going to tip to make an incredible drink that's giving me this story because I don't quite know what I want, you have to describe that shit on a can half the size of this. Yeah. So isn't then it become, if you are what you eat, is it become a design challenge once you've created that category? Because back in the day, you'd rely on a third party. You are it.
Yeah. A couple of thoughts.
You want the paper?
I think the challenge with CPG is that obviously it's all about margin. So sadly, in order to make higher margins, you oftentimes have to compromise somewhere. And our product is fully frozen, which makes sense for parents. We ship it directly to your home, which D2C is a whole other topic. We could have a whole panel on that, how that's changed. But for us, we have a cardboard cup, basically, that you can microwave, again, going back to the convenience point. But I think there's a reason why this is pretty niche, but anyone who has a baby has experienced this. There's these pouches, even like, call it long-distance runners eat from them. But the challenge with that is I think it's probably more than half of the baby food market now, but they're not great for babies because essentially you just suck down the pouch and you don't know, like ultimately it also can like impact the shape of your face, your baby's face basically, and jaw development and everything. So like, I think the reason why the pouches are so prevalent is they're cheaper to make, and like, they can sit on the shelf for a long time. And it's hard because there's a temptation to move to something similar to make the business to be a better business. Convenient, yeah. And we struggle with this often because obviously our product is premium. I don't want to build a product for the 1%. I would love for this to be widely available, and hopefully it can be. But if you make something that's fully organic, it's just going to be more expensive. But on the design piece and packaging, like, we're super proud of our cardboard cup. So yeah, it's a tricky problem. I don't know if you have the same problem, but
Well, to answer your question, on our side, I think initially it's less about narrative and it's much more about relationships. If you can't get a bartender over there to recommend your brand among the 600 brands that they've got there, you're fucked. Absolutely fucked. And
And they didn't even buy you a drink.
and they didn't buy a drink. And in alcohol, if you can't get recommended, if you can't get trade advocacy, you don't have a brand. So much of our work is actually about building relationships with bartenders,
I'm gonna ask-
bar managers, cocktail waiters, etc., so that they feel like they discovered your brand and they get to tell the story about it. So it is about narrative, but it's first about establishing some level of relationship.
But it's interesting because I think that we talk about it and we've been talking about it, but it's an age-old thing, right? A relationship. Even when I watched them build their business and they started their business with first 100 moms, those first 100 moms were basically their bartenders, So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about community and what.
yeah, definitely. We started the brand by asking moms to become ambassadors for the brand, which is pretty commonplace now. But we literally were in Brooklyn in Prospect Park with unmarked coolers, which was our first test product. And we had we had to cap it at 100 moms, and they came to pick up food from complete strangers and gave it to their baby on the spot. So I guess we looked pretty trustworthy, but this just goes to show that there was a need and still is a need for this product. But we call them our alpha moms, basically. It doesn't need to be someone with a massive following necessarily, but it's that person that people go to for advice. And now I know, being a parent, I'm I want to give all the advice that I can of, everyone's journey is individual, but it is, yeah, our moms are our bartenders basically. Because you're right. If your product isn't recommended, you're not going to get anywhere. So same for us.
All right, Shingy, let's jump.
Yeah.
Let's jump over a little bit. So I was talking about category creation, but let's talk about design as an aspect, because there's so many. I think people don't think a lot about how many facets there are to bringing transformation, especially in the CPG category, in any category, I would argue. But years ago, you had this idea. You said, why does toothpaste look ugly on your bathroom sink? Why doesn't somebody just create toothpaste that you want people to see? And I was like, yeah, that's why you're Shingy. But just talk about the importance of design.
Yeah, and I think this is why this discussion is super fun for me, because you're both doing things in a category that's a sea of sameness. And that sea of sameness meaning it's commoditized. And, Sofia, you said it's all about margin. Well, it's all about love. And margin is an outcome of creating something powerful. You go into a CVS, it's a sea of sameness, it's all locked behind plastic today, which rocks my world. But you walk in and it was really about toothpaste and toothbrushes. You walk in and it's primary colors and everything looks like candy. And I live in a very meek, beautifully well-designed environment. And if I'm going to use this thing as a commodity, I want it to feel like it's part of my harmony. So my advice was make an entire black toothbrush, an entire white toothbrush, and matching toothpaste. And it feels like it's limited edition in a sea of sameness. I'd buy 10 of that shit because maybe it's not going to be there next week. And I think when you think about design, when you start to end up, if you break it down to the brass tacks, a brand, I'll just talk about a brand in the context of that question that I think it did it really well. And so I'm half Chinese, I'm lactose intolerant, and I've tried every lactose intolerant style product, from soy to rice to avocado milk. This stuff tastes like snot. And when oat milk came along, I'm like, Jesus, this is amazing. And Oatly as a brand, as a category brand, they went to the barista who makes those incredible lattes and put their happy faces and shit on it to give them a product that performed as equally as good as cow's milk, which is why it's always worked. And what I think is amazing is that once they became popular, they stripped away all their 10 products and ended up with one product. And when the CEO came on, they said there's one thing left, the name. So they turned that brand they kept the name and completely redesigned this thing to feel like it's human. English only. They had incredible packaging design. And with that came permission for their brand to be very human. So very accessible, very funny, very ironic. And in a sea of sameness, they had a design that stood out, but their messaging in market stood out to the people that became their first ambassadors, which was the barista. So it really comes down to, I think, building something that people give a shit about. In that sea of sameness, how do you persuade somebody to do something that feels different? And how do you give them the ability for them to be the story?
We did a similar thing with Lalo. I mean, it's tequila, right? It's Blanco tequila in a clear bottle.
Well designed too.
Well-designed bottle, yeah, thank you. But what we noticed was that 50% of our consumer base were women. Not 50% of consumption, because men drink more than women, but we had half of our consumers were women. And that surprised us because that's not typical of tequila. It's more like 70-30. So we kind of followed that and followed what they were interested in. And our kind of strategy, if we had one for the brand, was to be the Vogue of tequila. Let's look like a fashion brand. Let's not look like a tequila brand. Let's lean into the femininity of what just wasn't there anywhere else in tequila. It's kind of macho and tough-looking bottles and gritty, agave fields and all that kind of stuff. And we said, no, let's not do that. Let's put beautiful women in amazing outfits in Mexico City, in beautiful, scenes and scenery, and just show them with the bottle as being, part of their brand of themselves.
Can I ask a question from Bonin and Shingy both? I'm curious, if you were starting a brand today, how would you launch it? Given I referenced like D2C obviously has changed a lot. There was arbitrage in Meta ads and Google ads 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I guess. I'm just curious if today, because I think CPGs might not be a very popular place to go to now. But I think it goes back to what you're saying about love, but I'm curious.
There you go, Fit. I think if I was to start a brand today, it would be in a crowded space, and it would be based upon how do I have an authentic relationship, and I know that word is abused, to that thing that I'm building, because if you do it right, love is contagious. The whole time that you've been talking, I've been thinking about my background is I grew up in a restaurant, and I'm a classically trained chef. And we learn this technique of mise en place. And the idea of convenience comes because you prepare. And the idea of launching brands today is not to oversaturate it and try and get to the lowest common denominator, because that's just media performance. The more you raise, the more you spend. You need to build something that people brag about. And I think the way that you did it with Tiny Organics is perfect. It's a long road. And that road has to be long, because if you think it's short, all these brands, these darling brands that get acquired, the first thing that happens after they get acquired is they primarily become uncool. And they start to get shut down, and then those founders go away. That IP goes to something else. And we've seen that over and over and over again. I honestly think the way you're doing it today, the way you both did it, you're just at the right place to be able to actually find the right category that needs that extra piece of love and that's differentiated. It's no different. That shit is no different today. What do you think, B?
It's a hard question because it all depends on the type of brand it is. So if it's a toothpaste brand, it's launched differently. I can't categorically say I would use influencers or paid media, but I think the single most important thing, which people don't think about, is once you find where you believe your communication can fit, doing it in a way that is creatively breakthrough in that. And I use two examples, you know, and you always, she's asking me a question that I tell her talk about all the time, but you can optimize in Instagram ads. If everybody else can do that, you're not going to win that battle. You can't win that battle. It's just it's a race it's an arms race. That's all it is at that stage. But if you can come up with something that has creativity breakthrough, not optimization breakthrough, but creativity breakthrough, you can win. And I look at LinkedIn, and everybody thinks about LinkedIn differently. There's one campaign that almost everybody in this room remembers, and that was Jean-Claude Van Damme on 2 Volvo trucks doing a spread. Now, that was for Volvo Precision Steering. Nobody, 1.0001% of the world even buys that product, but everybody saw that campaign because they did something on LinkedIn that had never been done. And so they used that platform to launch. Now, look, it was their market. And I'll use my own personal example. Look at my LinkedIn. What did I start doing? I said, I'm just going to put dad notes with a beautiful kid on it. Everybody's like, oh, I love your dad notes. I'm watching. I'm not. Everybody else is like, oh, let me throw up how smart I am and pretend that people are going to care about what I say. But people scroll it. All I did was use the same exact creative tactic that worked on Instagram, by the way. Everybody just put up cute photos of their cats and their babies on Instagram. I just did it on LinkedIn because nobody else was doing it. So I guess for me, that's always the piece, which is how do I find, and what I actually think interesting and what I was going to talk to you about. Sorry, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Well, what I was gonna say is, as you talk about design, the thing I find that a lot of brands forget is that it is the entire product experience that has to be designed. And when I think about like Tiny Organics, for those of you who don't know, it's finger food, and it builds cognition, it builds dexterity, but that means you also have to create a product that the kid can kind of pick up. Maybe it's squirmy, so he's got to learn how, you know, there's a bunch of stuff that went into the actual product design. So just talk about like what you go through building product design.
Yeah, the product is differentiated, but it is a crowded category, if you will. But finger foods, going back to my earlier point about the purees being fully invented, or like as a category being fully invented, there is no scientific reason why children should be learning to eat liquefied food, again, often shelf stable. And again, I caution myself because I don't want to shame anyone. We all like it's very convenient, and we all do our best as parents. But the idea really is to be vegetable forward, vegetable first. There's a flavor window between the ages of 4 months and 7 months, and we really the lifelong relationship with food starts at that time. You know, human beings start eating food, finger foods or purees at around 6 months. So for us, it's about, of course, we are organic. Some brands aren't. We probably will always be fully organic, but it's around vegetable introduction early. There's a movement called baby-led feeding, which is about what Bonnie talked about. The baby will learn to eat with their own fingers instead of being fed. And that's kind of the key in all of this. And they, as Bonnie was saying, learn eye-hand coordination, dexterity. And they really, I mean, ultimately it becomes this familiarity with savory flavors. So one more stat, which I think is fascinating, is that human beings have something called food neophobia, which is fear of new foods. It's an evolutionary fear. So most babies are going to, make funny faces when they eat something savory, including vegetables. And that's a normal reaction. And I think if we can kind of educate the market, I think we'll all be better for it.
So I'm going to ask you guys, but I first want to ask Shingy, because you keep saying love, which I believe is important. All we need is love. But we talk a lot about mission-driven brands. Is that the same as love, or are there different facets of love than just mission?
I think it's the same as love, as long as it stays true to its soul, and that's not always the case. So yes, but, and that's the problem, is the but. So I can see for Sofia, for example, that product you might want to be persuadable to something that might be more convenient led. So you meet somewhere between the pouch and the, basically run around the woods with a handful of food. somewhere in the middle there might be the utopian mass, but you're still in the early adopter stage for the vast majority later. And I think there's and years in, because it's a long road. But I think the mission was to make sure you build something that people love. People love stories. You have incredible. You just knowledge dropped a whole bunch of shit as a father that I don't know about. Instinctively, we know. We just got lazy. So I think it's easier to build loved brands. Are they the same as mission driven? No, and that's why it's a long persuaded answer.
Well, I was going to go to you next, Andy. Let's get it.
Yeah, I have a thought about that. I think most good brands start out with a sense of mission or a sense of purpose of what it is they wanted to do. And then they get pulled in a million directions by distributors, by partners, by someone who kind of knows better. And they get pulled away from that sense of who they were. And especially as they get big, they start to compromise on the ingredients because, hey, it's 5% cheaper if you do it this way. And pretty soon you get nibbled to death by a million sheep and your brand starts to stand for nothing. And when you go to these big organizations who have these gigantic brands, they're kind of shit, right? They've given up on that original sense of differentiation, on what made them successful in the first place, because a 5% here and 5% here and 5% there, and let's appeal to everyone, means they ended up standing for nothing. So I do think that, yes, the experience is important. Yes, the mission is important. But you have to stand for something if you want to be successful today. Period. End of story. You can't emulate your way to being a big brand by copying all the other brands. You can't AI your way to it. You have to have a position and then stick to it. And when someone comes along and says, hey, you know, you should do this because it's 5% cheaper, you just tell them to politely move along because that's not what you're about. So you have to choose, and it's hard sometimes. It hurts margin, it hurts distribution, and it hurts your success. But I think it's better to stand for something.
Yeah. I know we're gonna wrap up. I have to ask an obligatory, AI question at some point before we finish. So just think about something. Hey, you can just use ChatGPT, find an answer now. We'll come back to it. I do want to say it's interesting because I had a chance to, sit with Steak and Shake, and they took a person's passion brand and they've been able to maintain that brand and scale. And what I was going to say, because you just insulted my entire career, because all I've worked at is large companies that have shit brands, like you said. Many of them on tap here. And in the shakes that you're drinking as well, the Oreos, which I'm going to come to. I don't believe that scale is the challenge. I believe imagination is the challenge. And it takes people at those big brands, and I agree, because you're saying that are willing to find what that brand meant. So I look at Oreo, and what people don't realize is Oreo was about to go extinct, and or irrelevant, let's put it a different way. I don't want to take full credit, but I was a big part of it, changing the business when I came in. And I didn't even want to work on the business because it had done the same advertisement for 50 years. Twist, Lick, and Dunk, Mom and Kid, Oreo, Nabisco. And in its mind, what it thought was the most important thing to convey about the brand was ritual. Because for them, if I can get you to make it a ritual, it's consumption. But the reality is the brand didn't mean that. The brand actually was playful. It provided a space for me to actually have a playful moment with my kid, not create a ritual to force them to eat Oreos, but to have a moment. And they lost that. When we got back to that place, and even if you look now, something very simple, they redid the packaging before, and it was just an Oreo on the front. All we did was we slid the Oreo top cookie up a little bit, and it became a smile. And so much of that brand was reinvented around that. And once we unlocked playfulness, and it wasn't even about kids. It was about adults being reminded of what we called it wonder-filled, right? And so I think big brands can do that. Now, the problem is you are fighting margin, you are fighting that. But in some spaces, you can accomplish that.
Look, I like what you say about that. I mean, one of my favorite expressions has nothing to do with marketing and branding or advertising.
So why are you going to use it here?
Maybe you'll see the connection. Is is that tough times don't build character, they reveal it. And I believe that's true for brands, and yours, Oreo example, is a good one. I'm willing to bet that that was the original thought behind Oreos was playfulness and how you take it apart and twist it. And you just refound that. You excavated and rediscovered it. And I think for most brands, there's a truth way back in its history, and our job is to try and excavate that, find it, understand it, shine a light on it, because that was the magic that made it great in the first place.
You know, Gatorade had the same challenge, and it was because people forgot that it was built for hydrating kids that are waking up, athletes that are doing 2-a-days, and it was scientifically created for that. Instead, we said, oh, anybody should be able to drink Gatorade. And then we were like, oh, it has too much sugar. Yeah, because you're sitting on the couch drinking something that's not meant for couch sitters. That's the different beverage. That's the stuff that Coca-Cola sells. That's not what Pepsi sells. No. So, okay, so we gotta wrap it up. But I'm going to ask...
AI question.
I won't hit AI. But yeah, here, just one last question. Just going back to kind of the journey. So I know it's cheating over here. Like my kid's here smiling at us. Do you want the mic? Yep. Okay. Because he keeps using this word, the journey is long. Let me ask, do you still enjoy the journey?
Absolutely, but it's not easy. And going back to, you mentioned LinkedIn and social generally, I think it can be kind of a lonely place. I have an amazing co-founder who's one of my best friends, and we've been building this together. But I think this is where people fold. I've had friends who are in this like 8-year mark. I had someone basically someone introed me to a woman and was like, oh, I see on your LinkedIn, you've been building it for 8 years, but it's not really, she was like, she's from Finland. And we're like, we're nice people, but sometimes I think she didn't read the room. She's like, it doesn't look like it's kind of been going where you want it to go. And in my mind, I'm thinking, but it was just interesting that she saw that, because the journey it's already been almost a decade. But I genuinely believe we should all try to, it might sound so cliche, but try to make the world a better place or level the playing field. What I was saying earlier, yes, we're a premium product and it's pretty expensive now, but the idea really would be to, I don't even know if it's the new Gerber, but try to make it possible for more people to feed their children as healthy foods as possible. So yes, I'm enjoying it, but I think the founder, maybe it's fatigue, is not talked about enough, even by me, because it doesn't look good to investors. It doesn't, all this, like, it's just, so yes, 100%. And if I wasn't, I wouldn't be doing it still. But I generally believe I was put on this earth to bring this to life at a bigger scale.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a huge round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much.